My wife decided to divorce me because I was fat. But after a while it happened. She regretted her choice. You should have seen her face after I lost weight and walked hand in hand with two beautiful women. Let me start from the beginning. Ryan had always been a big guy, but it wasn't until Hannah's concern became impossible to ignore that he truly grasped how much his weight was affecting his health. He'd never let his size shake his confidence, but everything changed after Hannah lost two close friends to heart attacks. Her worry grew into something she couldn't push aside. I can't keep watching you do this to yourself, Ryan, she told him after yet another doctor's visit, her voice laced with fear. I love you, but I can't live every day terrified that I'll lose you. And she wasn't just talking anymore. The boundaries she set in their intimate life weren't up for discussion. Only 4 times a year, Ryan. Valentine's Day, our anniversary, and our birthdays. Her tone had been firm, her decision final. I need you here with me for the long haul. I need you healthy. At first, Ryan had been frustrated, maybe even a little resentful. It felt like punishment, a reminder of every way he had failed. But as time passed, something in him shifted. What started as an effort to make Hannah happy gradually became something more. He began to feel better, his clothes fit looser, his energy surged, and for the first time in years, he could look at himself in the mirror without instantly turning away. 2 years later, Ryan had shed 118 pounds, bringing him down to 207, the healthiest he'd been in a long time. But the journey had taken its toll. The relentless discipline, the constant pressure, the never-ending push to keep going, it was exhausting. The weight was gone, but now he felt weighed down by something else entirely. One evening, as they sat in the quiet of their living room watching TV, Ryan turned to Hannah, his voice low and uncertain. Hannah, I think I've had enough. He hesitated, running a hand over his face. This has been so damn hard. I don't know if I can keep pushing myself like this anymore. Hannah reached for the remote, pausing the show. Her eyes flicked toward him, unreadable. What do you mean? She asked, her voice steady but guarded. He let out a slow breath. I mean, I've lost the weight. I did it. But it feels like it's never enough. I'm tired. I've been at this for 2 years, and I just don't know if I can keep going like this. His voice was strained, carrying the weight of his exhaustion. Hannah's expression hardened as she took in his words. She had known this moment would come sooner or later, but that didn't make it any easier to hear. Ryan, you promised, she reminded him, her voice tight. You promised me you'd stay healthy. And now you want to just give up? Ryan sighed, rubbing his temples. I'm not giving up, Hannah. I don't know how much more I have left in me. It's draining. Hannah leaned forward, her eyes sharp and unwavering. You're not quitting, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Do you understand me? You don't get to just stop. If you do, then I won't be able to keep going either. Ryan blinked, confusion flickering across his face. What does that even mean? Hannah's voice dropped, her words suddenly cold and cutting. It means that if you quit now, if you decide you're done putting in the effort, then nothing changes on my end. Sex stays at 4 times a year. And I'll find satisfaction elsewhere. Ryan sat frozen, his mind struggling to process what he'd just heard. His chest tightened, his heart pounding as everything around him seemed to blur. Slowly, he turned to face her, his voice unsteady with emotion. Is that what this was all along? His throat tightened as he swallowed hard. A condition? His voice grew sharper. You've been pushing me to lose weight for you. For your approval. And now this. He gestured between them, his hands shaking with frustration. This is what I get in return? Hannah's face softened. Ryan, I didn't mean it like that. I was scared for you, she said, her voice faltering. Ryan let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. Scared for me? His voice rose with frustration. I've spent 2 years fighting for this. For you. I've lost 118 pounds. I've done every damn thing you asked me to do. And now you're telling me that if I don't keep pushing, you'll go somewhere else. Hannah's expression wavered as she saw the hurt in his eyes, the deep, cutting betrayal morphing into something darker. She reached out, desperate to calm him, but he stepped back, hands raised. No, Hannah, don't. His voice was firm, his jaw clenched tight. You've treated me like a damn project. Like something that needed fixing. He shook his head, his breath coming out uneven. Intimacy, our connection. It's all just been a bargaining chip to you. I've worked my ass off. For us. For this relationship. And now I see it. You weren't in this for me. You were just making me jump through hoops to earn some sliver of affection from you. His voice cracked under the weight of his emotions. You've been manipulating me. You've been manipulating this entire relationship. Hannah's face crumpled, her eyes welling with regret. Ryan, how could you do this to me? He interrupted, his voice barely above a whisper, but heavy with anger. The damage was done. There was no taking back what had been said. Ryan stood there, his mind racing, staring at the woman he thought he knew, the woman he had fought so hard for. A sickening thought wormed its way into his head, one he couldn't shake. Had she been thinking about cheating this whole time? Had she just been waiting for him to slip up? You've made me question everything, he murmured, his voice hoarse. Maybe you've been planning this for a while, huh? Maybe you already have someone else lined up. His words hit like a slap, and Hannah flinched, her face draining of color. Ryan, no. I would never. Would never? He cut in, his eyes narrowing. How the hell am I supposed to believe you now? How am I supposed to believe this wasn't always in the back of your mind? That you weren't just waiting for me to fail so you could finally do what you wanted? His voice hardened, the bitterness seeping through every word. You're telling me that after everything I've done, after all the sacrifices I made for us, you'd rather punish me for not being perfect instead of appreciating what I've accomplished? Hannah took a step forward, her hands trembling as she reached for him. Ryan, please. I didn't mean it. I was scared. I love you. I didn't know how to say it the right way. I never meant to hurt you. Her voice cracked. I was desperate. But Ryan took a step back, his expression unreadable now, his gaze cold, distant. You don't get to take it back, Hannah, he said, his voice flat. The damage is done, and I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Without another word, he turned and walked away. As Ryan headed to the garage, Hannah stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen, tears slipping down her cheeks. Could he ever forgive her? Could he ever trust her again? Could their relationship survive this? He had worked so hard for them, for a future together, but now he wasn't sure if there was anything left to fight for. Ryan sat in the garage for an hour, thinking everything over. His once solid belief in Hannah's loyalty had been shaken. While he didn't think she had cheated over the past 2 years, his trust had been deeply compromised. Now, he found himself uncertain about what she might do in the future. Eventually, he returned to the house, where Hannah was still sitting at the kitchen table, visibly upset. Keeping his voice calm, he told her he was done with the diet and would no longer follow the conditions she had set. Their intimacy would be limited to the agreed-upon 4 times a year, or not at all. That choice was now hers. However, if she decided to cheat, there would be serious consequences. He made it clear he wouldn't stay married to someone unfaithful and that he would be paying close attention to her actions. He warned her to be careful. After making his stance clear, Ryan told Hannah he was going out for a while but would be back for dinner, offering to order food if she didn't want to cook. The air between them was thick with tension as he walked out. Left alone, Hannah sat in despair, realizing the full impact of her words. Tears streamed down her face as regret consumed her. She wished she had just kept her thoughts to herself. Even after Ryan was gone, she couldn't shake the pain she had caused and cried for hours. When Ryan returned home, he found Hannah lying in bed, still crying. His doubts about her loyalty had reached a breaking point, and he knew he had to dig deeper. The next day, he went to their landline provider and requested call logs for both their home phone and Hannah's cell phone, since both accounts were in his name. The company provided him with 3 years' worth of records, which he paid for without hesitation. He then went to their cell phone provider, where he was able to access the same data since their account was joint. He wasn't ready to make any final decisions yet. He needed all the facts first. Ryan hesitated at the $300 fee for the phone data, but decided it was worth it to have everything electronically. He also made a mental note to consider switching providers in the future. When he got home around 4 p.m., Hannah was still asleep, so he let her rest. He went to his home office, locked the door, and sat down at his computer. He began organizing the data from the 2 CDs, creating a folder in his documents. His focus was on calls made in the first month after starting his diet, September 2008. Their home phone had made 96 calls that month to 19 different numbers. Using the format provided by the phone company, he sorted the calls by number, date, time, and duration. After about 90 minutes, he had compiled a full list of all calls made from their home phone over the past 2 years. Just as he was about to start on Hannah's cell phone records, he heard the office door handle rattle. Quickly, he saved his work, hid the files, and logged off the computer. When he opened the door, Hannah stood there, her face red and puffy from crying. She hesitated before meeting his eyes, and then spoke, her voice shaky. She admitted she had been selfish and cruel. She acknowledged that interfering with his diet was wrong and that the decision should have been his alone. She apologized sincerely, asking for his forgiveness. Though still upset, Ryan told her he forgave her, but only based on what he knew at that moment. He reminded her of everything he had sacrificed over the past 2 years, including intimacy, for her sake. But he had reached his breaking point. He couldn't keep living with this uncertainty. There's a gorilla in the room, he said, and we need to deal with it. He told her that the uncertainty was driving him crazy. He needed to know for sure that she hadn't cheated in the past and wouldn't in the future. He held her accountable, making it clear that her careless words and threats had led them here. Hannah had hoped Ryan would just forgive her and move on, but he made it clear that he needed real assurance before they could move forward. She felt the full weight of what she had done. She knew she had to face the consequences, but she still wished things could go back to normal. Resigned, she nodded silently and walked back to the bedroom, shutting the door behind her. She lay down again, quietly crying, no longer sobbing, just exhausted. Later, Ryan stood outside the bedroom door and asked if she wanted something to eat. "No, I'm not hungry," she mumbled. Without another word, he grabbed his keys and drove to a nearby restaurant, Grisham's, a place he and Hannah had often gone for good food and drinks. But tonight, nostalgia wasn't on his mind. He needed a moment to himself. For the first time in 2 years, he gave in to his cravings, ordering a bacon cheeseburger and a few beers. Despite the ache in his chest, he let himself enjoy the meal. When he got home, he went straight to his office, ready to continue reviewing the call logs. Now that he had a system in place, sorting through Hannah's cell phone records took half the time. Once he had both lists organized, he went through them carefully. Over the past 2 years, 3,482 calls had been made to 45 different numbers. Sorting them by frequency, Ryan found that nearly 300 calls had gone to his own cell phone. Around 200 had been placed to his parents, with a similar number to Hannah's parents. Her sisters had a comparable count, while his brother John had received about half as many. Most of the numbers were familiar, friends, family, people he recognized. But mixed in with them were a few numbers he didn't know, and those were the ones that caught his attention. Ryan couldn't ignore the strange pattern of over 200 calls to a number he didn't recognize and another 50-plus calls to a second unfamiliar one. As he scrolled further down the list, he found another 30 or so calls to other unknown numbers, which he guessed might be places like hair salons, shops, or churches. None of this bothered him too much, but he made a mental note of it and zeroed in on the 2 main numbers that had caught his attention. Ryan, being as meticulous as he was, decided to break things down further by sorting the calls by day and time for those 2 numbers. What he found sent a shiver down his spine, and soon, suspicion and anger began to bubble up inside him. Every Wednesday at 11 a.m., Ryan would meet with his boss and other department heads at a local restaurant for a staff meeting. They'd go over things for an hour, take a lunch break, and then wrap up around 2:30 or 3 p.m. And without fail, every Wednesday at 10:55 a.m., Ryan's phone would ring. The only times this didn't happen were when he was on vacation, but the pattern was undeniable. Every Wednesday at precisely 10:55 a.m., there'd be a call from the first unknown number. The only exception was when he wasn't in town, which made the situation all the more suspicious. Something didn't feel right. Then there was the second unknown number. Ryan soon realized that these calls came in every Friday afternoon, right when he was finishing up his weekly golf game with his brother and their close friends. They'd usually wrap up the 18 holes around 5:30 p.m., grab a drink at the clubhouse, and head home by 6:30 p.m. It was becoming clearer to Ryan that something was off, especially because Hannah always called him right before he teed off. She'd tell him how much she loved him and that she'd be waiting for him when he finished. Ryan started to piece things together. It seemed like Hannah was involved with someone, but he still didn't have any concrete proof or even a clue about who that might be. He didn't know how long this had been going on, but he wasn't ready to let it go. Ryan decided to dig deeper, extending his investigation for another year. He discovered that the calls had been happening for a few months before Hannah had shut him out, although they hadn't been as frequent. That told him something. Hannah had likely been involved with someone for a while, but the calls were more sporadic back then. All Ryan needed to do now was figure out who was on the other end of those calls, and then he'd know what to do next. He figured it would be easy enough to find out. A quick reverse lookup on the first number turned up nothing. It was a cell phone number that wasn't listed anywhere. But when he checked the second number, his blood ran cold. It was registered to a guy named Ethan Smith, someone Ryan immediately recognized as his personal trainer at the gym. It hit him hard. Hannah had found Ethan for him, and now she was calling him every Friday when Ryan was out playing golf. To confirm his suspicions, Ryan decided to go out again, heading back to Grisham's for a couple more beers. After the dinner rush, he approached Hannah, the attractive bartender, and explained his situation briefly. He asked if she could help him find out if the first number belonged to Ethan. She agreed, and with a few taps on the phone, she dialed the number, asking if Ethan was there. When she got him on the line, Hannah told him that a woman named Jennifer had given her the number as a potential trainer. She claimed she was new to the area and had heard Ethan's name mentioned at her hair salon while talking about fitness goals. Hannah shared some basic details about herself, her age, height, and weight, and mentioned she wanted to get into better shape. She even told Ethan that she aimed to weigh around 115 pounds. Ethan seemed to appreciate the compliment, and Hannah asked about his availability. After learning he had an opening due to a client quitting, she expressed interest in meeting him soon to talk about her fitness goals. She thanked him for his time and ended the call, saying she looked forward to their meeting. Ryan sat there, stunned. His worst fears were confirmed. Ethan was the guy from the gym. Even worse, Hannah had found out that Ethan had a spot open because one of his clients had dropped out. Ryan couldn't help but wonder if that client had been him. As he sat there feeling crushed, a bitter sense of irony washed over him. Hannah had told Ethan to be extra careful, and Ryan almost laughed, though it was a hollow, painful laugh. The cruel irony was, despite everything, he still couldn't deny that Hannah was beautiful. No need for weight loss. He smiled at Hannah, complimenting her on her looks and telling her that no one could have a more perfect body than hers. Hannah beamed at him, flashing that gorgeous smile. She teased him a bit, calling him kind, sir, and joked about why his wife would look elsewhere. Ryan returned the smile and agreed that 2 years ago, he wouldn't have been seen as much of a hunk. Still, that didn't excuse his wife's betrayal. He thanked Hannah for her help and support, which did wonders for his self-esteem. As he headed home, he felt a strange mix of gratitude and sadness. When he got back, it was late, and he went straight to bed. Lying there, he looked over at Hannah and felt a heavy sense of loss. He'd never felt so low, but deep down, he knew things could get even worse. As he lay there, he thought he heard a soft sob from Hannah, but he didn't acknowledge it. The next morning, he woke up to find Hannah curled up next to him. As she sensed his arousal, she reached around to touch him, apologizing for what she had said the night before and wanting closeness. But Ryan, feeling exposed and vulnerable, resisted. He reminded her of the boundaries he had set, the same boundaries he had communicated before. After that, Ryan got up, showered, and headed to work. Left behind, Hannah muttered to herself, realizing she'd have to face the emotional fallout of her actions. At work, Ryan confided in his boss about what was going on at home, and to his surprise, his boss was supportive. His boss encouraged him to take some time off to follow through on his suspicions, even offering a contact at a reputable electronics distributor. Grateful for the help, Ryan told his boss he'd take Wednesday through Friday off to follow up. The next day, Ryan visited the distributor's store, where he was treated with priority, thanks to his boss's call. He bought 3 high-end bugs with long battery life, capable of transmitting for hours. With the equipment in hand, Ryan headed home, where Hannah had prepared his favorite dinner, lasagna with garlic bread and sweet green peas. He thanked her for the meal before excusing himself to watch some TV. Hannah cleaned up the kitchen and joined him, but kept her distance, careful not to get too close. When it was time for bed, she retreated to their bedroom, giving Ryan the perfect chance to slip a bug into the home phone to record any conversations. Though he wasn't totally comfortable with the idea of bugging Hannah's cell phone, he did it anyway, not overly concerned. It was a quick job, and now Ryan had access to both phones, which gave him a lot more insight. But there was still the challenge of bugging Ethan's phone, something Ryan hadn't quite figured out yet. He already had the recordings from Hannah's phones, but he wondered if she might use a different phone, maybe even a payphone, to communicate with Ethan. Wanting to be thorough, he decided to make a move on Ethan's phone. Ryan recalled that Ethan often worked with a well-built blonde woman on Wednesday mornings, and he couldn't shake the feeling that there might be something more to their relationship. He figured this could be his opportunity to gather more info. So, when Ethan was distracted with the blonde, Ryan showed up at the gym and spotted Ethan's phone lying on a towel about 10 to 15 feet away from where they were. It was risky, but Ryan felt he had nothing to lose. He grabbed the phone and quickly slipped it into his pocket, heading straight for the men's room. There, he was able to plant the bug in the phone without anyone noticing. The hardest part now would be getting the phone back on the towel without drawing attention. When Ryan returned to the gym, Ethan was still busy with the blonde, so he didn't have much time to waste. After thinking it over, Ryan decided his best bet was to subtly slide the phone across the floor toward the towel. It was a bold move, but he hoped it would be discreet enough. The phone made a little noise as it slid, but fortunately, Ethan didn't hear it. Ryan's heart raced as the phone slid under the towel, landing perfectly in place. It wasn't the worst spot, and Ryan felt a sense of relief wash over him. He quickly left the gym, thinking his work was done. As soon as he stepped outside, his cell phone rang. It was Hannah, asking to touch base before his meeting. Ryan had never told her he was taking the week off, let alone skipping the meeting. He tried to brush her off, but then spent the next 10 minutes listening to the bug's audio from his car. Pretty soon, Ethan's phone rang, and Ryan could hear him pick it up. Ethan greeted Hannah on the other end and asked if she wanted to meet up at his place. But Hannah sounded cautious, telling Ethan that Ryan was getting suspicious and they might need to lay low for a while to avoid any problems. Ethan didn't like it, but Hannah insisted, admitting that from the very first time they'd been together, she'd known she'd do whatever it took to be with him. Still, she didn't want to risk more trouble with Ryan, so she suggested they cool it for a bit. She mentioned that Ethan would have to make do with one of his other girlfriends for now. Listening to their conversation, Ryan felt a wave of sickness and anger rise up in him. His heart felt heavy with the realization that Hannah had been seeing Ethan for over 2.5 years. Every Wednesday, and then on golf Fridays, more than 100 encounters. He couldn't believe it. He kept asking himself how she could claim to love him while lying to him like this. The pain inside him twisted into fury, and thoughts of revenge began to take over. For the next 2 days, Ryan set his plans in motion. He made some key contacts and got everything ready for the weekend. Meanwhile, the phone taps revealed that Hannah had a beautician appointment Friday morning. During a conversation with her beautician, Hannah mentioned wanting a new hairstyle to throw Ryan off her scent. She also planned to buy some provocative lingerie to distract him further. When asked about Ethan, Hannah casually admitted she might cut back on their meetings, but she dismissed it as a minor adjustment. Each new conversation Ryan overheard chipped away at his heart, but fueled his anger as well. The love he thought they had felt like a lie now, and he couldn't understand how things had gone so wrong. But one thing was certain, he was ready to carry out his revenge. Then, on Saturday, after lunch, the doorbell rang. Hannah went to answer it, only to find a woman named Hannah, who introduced herself as a friend of Ryan's. She claimed Ryan had invited her to spend time by the pool. Hannah was taken aback, but led her to the pool area. Not long after, 2 other women, Maya and Sophie, showed up, also claiming that Ryan had invited them to use the pool. They each explained their connections to Ryan. Maya had worked with him for years, and Sophie had served him at Grisham's. Hannah, now faced with 3 attractive women, began to feel uneasy as they sat up by the pool, applying suntan lotion to each other. It wasn't long before the women decided to strip down for an all-over tan. One by one, they untied their bikini tops and set them aside. Hannah, feeling increasingly uncomfortable, considered asking them to leave but realized she couldn't without causing a scene. She knew Ryan had invited them, so she had to tread carefully, especially with the tension already hanging between them. Around 3:30 p.m., Hannah sat next to the woman Hannah and started talking. She shared that she worked as a bartender at Grisham's and had overheard Ryan telling Hannah everything about their situation. Hannah was stunned and told Hannah she'd made a huge mistake. She warned that Ryan was now suspicious and actively investigating things. If he found out about any past or future infidelities, she said, Ryan intended to take one of the women for every lie. Hannah was shocked, but before she could respond, Hannah added that Ryan also planned to confront her, and if she lied, he'd take one of the women as punishment. Hannah hinted that the 3 women might be open to it, especially since they all found Ryan attractive. Hannah, already aware of the consequences of her actions, knew that Ryan might soon get involved with one of them. She figured that, in an effort to cover her tracks, Hannah would likely lie, which would keep Ryan pretty busy. Maya then sat down next to Hannah and revealed she had known Ryan for years and always thought he was sweet and handsome, even with the extra weight. After he lost it, she admitted, her feelings for him grew stronger. Maya said she'd be open to pursuing a relationship with Ryan and that he could have her whenever he wanted. Sophie joined in, adding that she had been watching Hannah and Ryan's relationship for a couple of years. Sophie couldn't help but admire Ryan's kindness and the depth of love he had for Hannah. She even fantasized about being in Hannah's place, acknowledging how much Ryan did to try and make her happy. His transformation into a more fit and confident man only made Sophie admire him even more. At 4 p.m., as planned, Ryan walked out to the pool deck, finding Hannah with the 3 women. He greeted Hannah and made light-hearted jokes about their improved tans, teasing them a little. He encouraged Hannah to join in on the playful banter, and then, with a mischievous grin, asked why she hadn't taken her top off yet. Reluctantly, Hannah complied. But then Ryan shifted the mood, getting serious. He asked her 2 important questions, demanding honest answers. First, he asked if she had ever cheated on him during their marriage, and she denied it. He pressed further, bringing up Ethan from the gym, and again, Hannah denied it. She seemed genuinely confused about how Ryan had come to this conclusion. Ryan, undeterred, kept questioning her about her secret meetings with Ethan on Wednesdays and Fridays, even though he already had proof of the affair. Despite everything, Hannah stuck to her story, hoping Ryan didn't have any real evidence. The tension was thick as the 3 women, Hannah, Maya, and Sophie, sat back, knowing this moment of revelation was close. Ryan then revealed everything he had uncovered. Phone logs from both Hannah's landline and cell phone, showing a clear pattern of calls with Ethan. To confirm it, he even had Hannah call the number herself, proving it belonged to him. Although Ryan didn't have any pictures of Hannah and Ethan together, he made it clear that their weekly calls were far from innocent. Hannah was stunned. She realized, in that moment, how much Ryan knew. She understood that their relationship had reached its breaking point. As she tried to say something, Ryan stopped her, telling her there was nothing she could say that would change his mind. Despite how much he had loved her, the hurt, anger, and disgust he felt had overpowered those feelings. Ryan then introduced the three women, Maya, Sophie, and Hannah. He explained their connections to him. Maya was a longtime work colleague, someone who had always been sweet and beautiful, and he acknowledged the crush she had on him. He'd never acted on it, though, out of respect for his marriage to Hannah. Maya smiled, recognizing the bond they shared. Sophie's relationship with Ryan had started during their visits to Grisham's, where she served them. He shared how Sophie had fantasized about being with him and admired him for his physical transformation. Ryan admitted he was open to exploring those fantasies with Sophie. Hannah, still reeling, looked at the three women in shock. Ryan introduced Hannah as a seasoned bartender who had shown Ryan compassion when he was distressed at Grisham's. He acknowledged how Hannah had helped him gather information and form a connection with her. As Ryan spoke, Hannah looked on the verge of breaking down, her emotions all over the place, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to say something, but she stayed silent. Ryan told the women that he planned to explore these new relationships with them, but he made it clear that ending his marriage with Hannah was the only way forward. He expressed his reluctance to break his vow, but he felt it was the only solution. Hannah, overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation, pulled out divorce papers and handed them to Ryan. She apologized, begged him to reconsider, but Ryan questioned whether she even loved him. He pointed out that her actions over the past 2 years, over 100 instances of betrayal, proved otherwise. The court hearing was scheduled for the following Friday, and after the legal separation, Ryan intended to pursue relationships with the three women. He suggested that indulging in these new connections might help him forgive Hannah and understand the satisfaction she had found in her affair with Ethan. Ryan hoped these relationships would offer the love and support he had believed he had with Hannah. Ryan told the three women it was time for them to leave, assuring them he'd reach out to each of them individually. He went inside to gather his things, preparing to stay at a hotel until Friday, when either he or Hannah would officially move out. Hannah, completely lost, stayed by the pool, quietly sobbing. Ryan stood by the door, his suitcases packed, taking a deep breath before staring at Hannah, still sitting in the kitchen, looking utterly defeated. "I warned you, Hannah," he said, his voice cutting through the air with sharp finality. "I told you about the consequences of your actions. And now I'm not sure I can ever look at you the same way again." Hannah's eyes widened, her stomach turning with dread. "What are you talking about, Ryan?" she asked, confusion seeping into her voice. "When you told me you canceled on Ethan the other day, I knew something wasn't right. But I didn't realize the full picture until I found out about Clara Harris." Hannah's breath caught in her throat. "Clara Harris? What are you talking about?" Her voice quivered as she tried to understand where this conversation was headed. Ryan nodded slowly. "Yeah, Clara Harris. Ethan pursued her after you supposedly canceled on him. He thought he could just walk into another woman's life without any consequences. But Daniel, Clara's husband, didn't take kindly to that. Let me tell you, Hannah, Daniel and his associates didn't exactly let Ethan walk away unscathed. They beat the hell out of him badly. His face was so bruised you wouldn't recognize him. Broken ribs, missing teeth. It was brutal," Ryan said, his tone flat, almost cold. "And the worst part? Daniel actually gave me the chance to take a swing at him. Told me I owed him for what you did. Didn't need much convincing. I gave him one, right where it counts. Right in his groin." Ryan's voice lowered, almost detached. "I don't know if Ethan will ever recover from that. Doesn't seem likely he'll be able to do much of anything for a while." Hannah's face drained of color as she struggled to process what Ryan was saying. "Well, since I'm now levels above you in fitness, I need someone my equal," Ryan continued. "I'm done here. I'll be getting my satisfaction elsewhere." When the police questioned Ryan about Ethan's attack, he denied any involvement, saying he had a solid alibi. Since it was his regular golf day, his brother and friends could confirm where he'd been. Ryan then informed Hannah that they would meet in court on Friday. With one final, cold glance, he wished her a good life before walking away. Hannah, left alone, packed her bags in the next 2 hours and went to her mother's house. The divorce process took 7 months, leaving Hannah devastated and spiraling into a deep depression. But contrary to his earlier claims about pursuing relationships with the other women, Ryan never followed through. Instead, he found comfort in the company of 2 German shepherds, ultimately discovering the true, unconditional love he had been searching for all along. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. See you soon.